So let's have a look at a different way of writing data structures and bits of code. And that involves using classes and objects. So obviously we're going to do this in PHP. So we're going to work our way down this list and look at what are objects and classes, how do you create them, and then we'll look at what's inside classes and objects, which are constructors. They use inheritance, which I'll explain in a little bit of detail, and then this notion of overriding a method. All that will become clearer as we progress our way through. So let's just start with what is an object and a class. Now, classes and objects are a relatively sort of recent, in the sort of last 25 years, way of actually designing bits of programs. In a way, you can think of them as a sort of a single sort of structure, and in that structure what we have is we have kind of the data and bits of code that enable that data to be used in a meaningful way. Now, in a way, you can actually sort of visualize classes and objects as being closer to sort of real world structures, and that's one of the arguments that is used for the sort of a class-based or object-oriented design and program code as well. When you construct things, they do actually sort of represent, they're a closer representation of real-world objects and things. And this notion of classes and objects is not just used actually in programming code. There is actually an entire design philosophy in sort of system design and programming that enables you to actually use classes and objects. And so revolutionary is this sort of notion that nearly every sort of modern app and application design process actually uses classes and objects to some extent. So what does a class actually look like? Well, let's have a look at the simplest thing that we can do. Let's imagine that we're talking about a person. Now, a person as a class, when I say a class, you can visualize a class as being like the design of what a person actually is. In a way, this is, if you like, it's the type of what a person actually is. So you're familiar with types of data like integers, whole numbers, floats, strings, characters. Those are kinds of bits of information. Well, here we're talking about a person being a design, a type of a thing. And the way that we design that, I'm sort of using this style here, which comes from UML, is that a class has a name. So here you can see in the top box, we've got the name person. And when we write the class down, the name of the class is done with a capital letter at the beginning. So you can see that person there has a capital P. And then below that, we've got two boxes. And what we've actually got in those two boxes are that notion of the data that will make up what is a person, and then functions or routines, or sometimes these are called methods, that actually enable a person to do its work. So when we're interacting with a person, we'll be using those routines to actually interact with those bits of data. So here, what we've got is we've got the data that describes a person. So I've just made this stuff up. Let's imagine a person that's got a first name, a last name, and an age. And to actually interact with that person, then a sort of way to get information in and out of the person, we're going to use these functions. And often these are set and get pairs. So to push information into here, we'll have set, and to pull information out, we'll have get. And in this simple example, you can see that because we've got three pieces of data, we've got three pairs of sort of routines, functions, to push information in and to get information out. Now, to use the sort of formal language of classes and objects, what we'd say is that the person class has three properties. So it's got three bits of data inside, three things that we can use: first name, last name, and age. And rather than talk about functions, often in the object-oriented world, we talk about methods. But they are, and you'll see when we actually implement them in PHP, they are functions. So here we have our person with three properties, in other words, three bits of data and 6 methods, 6 functions. So how do we actually, let's imagine that we've actually got that person class so we can actually use it. How do we use it in PHP? Well, what we do is we create an object of that class. So the class is the design, is the template, the description of what that will actually be. And then to actually use that class, what we do is we create an object of that class. So we're going to create a person. So how do we do that? Well, in PHP, we make up a variable name. So here I've got, for example, my person. So my person is going to be an object. It's going to be an object, and we create it by using the reserved word new. And we go new, and then after that, we have the name of the class. Remember, with that capital letter at the beginning. So here we've got a capital P, and we've got some brackets at the end, and I'll explain later on how we actually use those brackets at some point. So what that does is, if I read that aloud, that says my person, which is going to be a variable. My person is going to be an object of type person. Now, if we want to access the inside of the object, the way that we do that is to use those sort of get and set pairs. So set first name. Now remember, I haven't actually shown you how that's implemented yet, but I will do later on. Set first name is a function, and what we're going to do is we're going to use that function, it's part of the object, to push information inside, into the object my person. So we go set first name, and then in brackets, we're going to pass in a piece of data, and that piece of data is obviously going to be the first name. In this case, I'm just going to use the word Homer. And then we've got set last name, and we're going to pass in the piece of data Simpson, and we're going to go set age and 38. So the set methods actually push information into the object. Now the way that we use the notation is we use that like an arrow, which is actually hyphen and a greater than symbol. PHP uses that arrow. Not many languages use that, but PHP does. So what we're saying is we're going to use the function, the method, set first name or set last name and set age inside my person to pass information into the object. So you could imagine that what happens is when that runs, when set first name runs, Homer actually is pushed into the object. Set last name Simpson pushes last name in, and then set age sort of pushes in that age of 38. Just like that. If we want to pull data out of an object, well, we use those get functions. So for example here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to print those values out. So, we go my person, that's the name of the object, then an arrow, and then we're going to use the method inside the object. So we pull out get first name, that comes out, it's a string, and so we could print it out. We don't have to print it out, we could put it in another variable, we could do whatever we like with it. Here I'm just going to print it, get the last name out, get the age out, just like that. So to summarize then, a class is the design, is the template for a thing that has bits of data and has the routines that enable that thing to actually do the work. That's the class. The class is the design, is the template. To actually use one of these special classes, what we have to do is we have to create an object. And an object will have bits of data and bits of routines, functions in it. To actually use it, we will create the object, and then we'll use the set and the get functions to sort of push information into it and then pull information out.